live. Okay, we're live. Welcome to System Design Fight Club. Give me a minute here to get set up. I don't think the notification's gone off quite yet. Should actually be a fun problem today. It's a little bit easier, but they actually did something rather innovative. Craigslist did something rather innovative. So I think it still is an exciting problem. Gotta adjust my file size for okay, I think we're live now. Okay, and for anyone not familiar with Craigslist, so this is an older website. This is Craigslist. It's kind of like Facebook Marketplace, but from way back when React.js and Angular weren't really a huge thing. So it's like probably from around the era of MySpace, maybe even a little bit earlier, to my understanding. It's a pretty old website. It just kind of has some like listings, and then you'd click on one, and then you'd have the listing page. It's really straightforward, but they did something really innovative that we're going to talk about in the problem. You can see over here is that we're actually going to talk about load balancers a little bit, because that's where the innovation is that if you go to a listing page, you'll notice that it ends with .html. It's because it is a static file. It's pre-generated, and so there's some really cool tricks that they actually did back in the day that I don't know if they're still doing all of them, but I thought it was rather clever what they did. It's a pretty fun problem, and it is allegedly going to be in this upcoming book called Acing the System Design Interview. It's by Manning. It's not that's the publisher is Manning. I've kind of looked at some of the pre-released material. Don't pre-order it. They keep bumping the date at which it would actually be published. And so I'm wondering if it's one of those things kind of like what Yandere Dev did with his video game, where it's just been perpetually in pre-order for the last decade or something, because it was originally listed for like September. Now it's out listed for like December. So Yeah, watch out for that. I need to post a invite to the Discord group in case you guys don't have that. And also remind them that I am live. So give me a minute here. Well, I'd just like to give it a few minutes to make sure that we can let everyone in the Discord group join in. I usually uh, start the videos at the same time every week. And so if I started it like a few minutes early, then someone in the Discord group might get caught by surprise and miss it. I think we can go ahead and start it at like 10:44 or something. I'll go ahead and start like a couple minutes here. This should be a pretty quick problem. It's interesting, but it'll be pretty quick. All right, yeah, let's just go ahead and get it started. A couple minutes early today. I'm probably going to do a little intro as anyways, so anybody that's going to get caught by surprise and isn't going to join for another 2 minutes shouldn't miss out on too much. All right. So like I said, it should be a pretty simple problem, but it is interesting. It's interesting but simple. Somebody asked a really great question to kind of summarize why I'm doing this is that I was looking into something before this. I was trying to compare whether, so I noticed that they had like different folders for each one. I was thinking that the pictures might actually also be stored on the same folder, but they're actually not. And that was a little disappointing actually. Anyways, what's different about this problem versus a blog post design problem or Twitter? So this is going to be very different from Twitter because with Twitter, you wouldn't be able to take advantage of the static page generation trick that's being taken advantage of by Craigslist. With a blog post website, I think you would be able to do this because with blog posts, it's really common to do some kind of static page generation trick, like with Jekyll, for example, is a really commonly used thing for that. But it's the really cool trick to this is the static page generation approach. Whereas with Twitter, maybe for like a Twitter, like a single tweet, if you click on a singular tweet, you might be able to do some kind of static page generation there, particularly if it's a really hot tweet that keeps getting embedded in lots and lots of different news pages or something. Like if it's an Elon Musk tweet and they like to embed it everywhere, I mean, you might be able to do this trick there too. But it would be a little bit more niche and more of a edge case rather than like a main thing where like with a blog post, you're probably going to do that. So this is Craigslist. You can see there's a whole bunch of different categories right here. You click on one and it brings you over to this page where you're able to go through a couple of listings. And then you click on one of the specific listings, it'll bring you over to here. And you'll see if you go to the URL, it ends in .html. The other pages don't end in .html. This is a static page. It's a static asset. You're able to serve it in a really special way because it's static. You can stick it right onto a CDN. You can stick it right onto S3 and serve it straight off of S3. You can even serve it straight off of certain load balancers. That's what's really special about it. There is actually one book that allegedly is going to cover it. It's Acing the System Design Interview by Xiong Tan. It's over here. I've wanted to order this book for a while, but I've noticed that it was on pre-order. And from what I've seen in the gaming industry, if it ever says pre-order, don't click the button because you're a sucker. And sure enough, it was originally listed for September. It was actually already supposed to be out by now. They've actually kicked back the release date to December. So I am like really happy I didn't pre-order it back when I saw this in July or something. You're able to see a pre-release copy, but I would not hit the pre-order button. I would not do that. I've already kind of checked it out a little bit. I don't know if they actually had Craigslist on there. Allegedly, they're going to cover it though. Anyways, looking into the problem for today, I guess we can go ahead and get started. There's 3 requirements that we're going to have in this problem. We're just going to cover, making a listing, viewing the listings page, which was that second one over here, and we're also going to have looking at specific listings details page, this one. Yeah, I don't see any questions in the chat. I'm going to keep going with the drawing part. So again, we're going to have 3 different cases that we're handling. So we need 3 different browser things. So we're going to have user making listing, user viewing listings, and we're going to have user viewing listing details. Okay, and we're going to have it as three different, we're going to do the naive solution first. We're going to do the naive one, which is with the database, and then you'll be able to see the difference that's made by the load balancer. I always like to start with naive approaches. That's kind of like what you see in the coding books. Yeah, but I already kind of showed the fancy trick. So I don't think you're going to be able to do the fancy trick with at least two of these, and that's why it's kind of fun to talk about. I also would kind of like to talk about these two approaches too. Yeah, okay. I'm going to do the listing post service. Do things view service, and then we're going to have the listings detail service. I see your questions. I'm going to get to them in a, I want to crank this first approach out first, and I'll go ahead and get through a couple of the questions in the comments. So we got these three, and then we're going to go ahead and have a database. We're going to have some kind of database like that. So with our naive approach, we're not going to do any kind of static generation. We're just going to go ahead and have it like this. So the request comes in, you do a call for writing to the database, get a response back, and you get your 200 OK. Over here, you're trying to view the listings, send your request in, you do a key range query, get your list of results, send your response back. Over here, you want to view a specific listing, you send it over here. You have a specific ID you want to look up, you get all the details for that ID, it sends them back, and you get your response over here. We're going to call this the listings PB. And then the schema is really easy. I'm going to write that really quick, and then we can go ahead and get into a couple of the comments in the chat. Okay. Make this large. First, there's going to be a category ID, such as, I think it's like vehicles, like you're trying to sell your car. Have your listing ID. Let's say it's actually not super high volume for the postings. It's definitely sub 10,000. So you could actually just go ahead and use a PostgreSQL instance. Just go ahead and write that. That was something interesting. So the postings is always going to be pretty low, but you might have a higher read volume. I think it's very reasonable that you would have a much higher read volume than your write volume to the database. And so there's a couple different options for scaling it up. I could even just go over all of them after we maybe look at the cool trick. There's like a dozen different ways to scale up for the read volume. The actual solution that Craigslist uses is just very different though, which is why this problem is so interesting. Then you'd have some kind of like listing details. I don't know if you, I guess we can just go ahead and do it like that. It could just be inlined and rather than made as like a sub object in a JSON blob or something. I'm just going to write it like this for whatever reason. I just feel like this might be a little more clear, but you can just go ahead and flatten that instead. That's a different approach. You're going to want to have the timestamp. And then since you are, when you're looking at the listings, they're actually listed by the time 5 hours ago versus as you scroll down the page, the time gets further away. So they're sorted by the time. And so you're actually going to want to sort by the timestamp or the listing ID if that one is created in an increasing order. But I noticed that The IDs are, it doesn't look like they're using a Unix epoch time for whatever reason. Maybe they're using a UUID. And so in that case, you would probably want to sort by the timestamp. If you're not, if this is not properly sortable, you probably want to sort by the timestamp. So that would be a secondary index right there. And this would be your primary key. That. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go through the comments a bit, but that is our first approach. It's the naive approach. I'm going to label that, actually. I really should label that. Okay, let's see what's going on in the live chat. So that's another really great call out, is that it would probably do really well in SEO. That's completely right. That's actually why a lot of blogging software does the static page generation, like with Jekyll, is that you get really, really fast page load times. So yeah, I completely agree. It'd make the listings very, very searchable too if they get indexed by Google search. I don't know if it actually does that. Wow, posted 26 days ago, updated an hour ago, instead that bumped it up. Okay, I didn't know that. Huh. So I guess it might actually make them searchable. That would totally make sense. Is that browse at user browser user doing something? No, it's not. I actually have a library, and it's actually on my in my GitHub repository. I do actually have my library that I always use for these problems in there. So I'm going to post a quick link to that in the chat. You can find it just over here. And then, yeah, I made this really nice infographic over here. It's kind of like what I've been spamming on Blind for like a solid year. I actually do have like 20 books. I actually just got another 4 this weekend, just over this past week. I got another 4 books. They're on Kubernetes, Docker, and then there's this one called Node.js with distributed systems or something. And it's actually pretty solid. It's actually, I actually do like it a little bit. It says Node.js on the cover, but it's not necessarily a Node.js book. It even talks about load balancers a little bit, as well as Kubernetes and Docker. And then I also got a 4th book on, I don't remember what the heck it is. Anyways, the library is right here. And so if you just download this, you can import it into Excalidraw, and then you'd be able to use the same components that I have. Yeah. Is it important to mention their pure? Oh, you know what? I'm also going to do. There, that's my answer to your question. Yeah, okay. Is it important to mention their pure HTML? Well, so I mean, it can also have JavaScript in there. And I mean, you could have a link to some JavaScript assets, but I think the HTML part is kind of important. So usually when you're doing like React.js, there'd be JSX. And so then a huge part of the page actually would be asynchronously rendered. It wouldn't just be right in the HTML on the first page that you'd like curl off of the endpoint. So I think it is actually kind of important. Looking at the next question, I'll make this the last one, and then we can go ahead and talk about some of the other approaches for this. We'll do the fancy one, and then I think I could even talk about what was it? Read replicas. I'm talking about approaches here instead. I should maybe just go ahead and move that over to an approaches section. That would maybe make a lot more sense. So you're seeing me edit this live. Another thing that I wanted to call out for anyone else that's kind of newer to the channel is that that GitHub page does also have the files for at least 50 of my problems. At some point, it should have all of the problems I've covered on my YouTube channel. But if you went over like the problem section, you'd see that it has, it's at least like 50 in there, I think, with all of the images and my text file. And so when you see me editing this live, and if you're a little annoyed by it, well, it's like these are kind of important. I like to upload them. Yeah. Okay, moving on. I think we should keep index at the category ID also, right? Oh, that's right. You would also, so when you're doing the key range query, right here, you would do a where clause. So it would look a little bit like select star from listings table where category ID order by timestamp. So that's why I had a secondary next on timestamp, is that we're going to sort by it, of course, but you were completely right that you would actually want to have a secondary next on this one. You're completely correct. That's totally right. It might even be good for partitioning key. If you were going to scale it up, this is what I'd pick as a partitioning key because of that key range query. But it's probably not going to be high enough scale that you would need to do this. So you're not going to have the scale is not going to be high enough that you'd probably actually need to do any partitioning on this. You'd probably stick with PostgreSQL. If it was high enough that you would maybe want to do that. I mean, so I guess with the read volume, if the read volume got high enough, you'd maybe switch over to DynamoDB and partition by that. And so that would be for like the read replicas. Otherwise, yeah, you would just have it as a secondary next to start with. And then if you cranked up the read volume, one of the first approaches, I guess, is even DynamoDB for, so it would be like, yeah, but that it's like the real bottleneck though is going to be the IO bottleneck right here, or just through this area. There's going to be a massive IO bottleneck getting those web pages down. And so it's going to be it's much more likely that you should just go ahead and pre-generate the whole thing. That would be the bigger bottleneck than the reads going through the DB. But yeah, you were completely correct. I think we can go ahead and maybe do another approach, and then I'll go through some of your other questions here. I did kind of want to show the really fancy approach with the load balancers. I definitely want to show the really fancy trick with the load balancers. I'm going to go ahead and draw that just because that's the most exciting thing. So we're going to go ahead and copy paste this whole thing over. So we're going to do the really fancy proxy load balancer trick. So we've got that, and then this is the only part that so there's a way that you could do it with the listings view service, but you're like hosting frequently enough that you'd probably have to regenerate this page like dozens of times per hour. Which I mean, in some cases that's not really a big deal, but like if you were doing like a CDN or something, I feel like it's not going to be as effective as it would just for this page. This page is just literally not going to change, like in all, it hasn't changed for like 20 days probably. It's yeah. Anyways, this is how the listings query is going to work. That's for over here on this part, but for this listings detail service. So what you would do is you could just go ahead and use a DB trigger, and then you would have like some kind of task runners. So like Lambda functions, for example, that's really what I'm thinking there. Usually when I say task runners, it's for some Lambda triggers off of Kinesis or something. But over here, just plain old AWS Lambda functions, or like a good one. You just need something that can run some code for generating an HTML file. So you're going to have this thing go through there, and then you're just going to pop it straight onto a server. So usually it's going to look kind of like this. Usually that's how it looks, is that this is actually like a whole bunch of different services, a whole bunch of different machines horizontally scaled out with a load balancer in front of them. But you can actually, the way that worked like older, like way back in like the early 2000s is if you didn't have, so you didn't have AWS, and so you would have to set up your own load balancer. And so you have this machine out in the front, and it was your load balancer, and you pop some kind of software on it, like Apache web server. If you've ever set up a LAMP stack, you're of course going to be familiar with an Apache web server. Another alternative is Nginx. That's actually how it's pronounced, is Nginx is how you pronounce that. Blows some people's mind when they hear that. I didn't know that for the longest time either. So you got your load balancer here. Oh, wow, the lines are getting drawn around even when I don't have them fully on the. Okay, and we're just going to have static files stuck directly onto it. So you're going to generate some static files just right off those task runners. And you're going to pop them right onto that load balancer, just like that. And so you'd have a DB trigger. To actually do, it's got a DB trigger. It would hit the task runners, and then they're going to go ahead and build an HTML file and deploy it to your machine that is running the load balancer. Going to move to the front. There we go. And we're going to type DB trigger, just like that. So DynamoDB also supports DB triggers, but if you're going to be doing this, if you're going to be making static files, I think DynamoDB might not be the best idea. Well, so I mean, this would still have to scale up, and then so if you're hitting a scaling bottleneck in terms of reads over here, you're going to need more machines handling the reads, and then you should probably partition. Well, so if the database is small enough, you don't even have to partition. You don't even have to partition, you just copy the whole database to multiple read replicas. Yeah, I guess you don't even really need, you can just do read replicas of the PostgreSQL database. You don't even really need to partition it. Partitioning is more for if your scale of the writes is too high. Partitioning is when your write scale is too high. So if you're just cranking up the read volume, you can just do read replicas. You don't even need to do partitioning. But if you did need to do partitioning from too high for the write volume, you can go ahead and partition over this one. That would probably be the best idea for it. Yeah, that's the load balancer trick. I'm going to go through a couple more comments, and then we can go ahead and talk about more approaches. Something to call out here, though, is that I don't think HA proxy can actually serve up static files. I don't think ELB, that's an AWS service. That's AWS's load balancer. I don't think that can do it either. So neither of these can actually do the static file generation. I don't know if Trafic can either. That one's a reverse proxy, I believe. I think it's primarily intended as a reverse proxy. I'm not as familiar with that one. The big two are these, I believe. And then if you use AWS, of course, you're going to know about ELB, but not. I don't think you can serve files straight off of ELB. The alternative approach there is, of course, that you'd have S3 instead. That's what I'm going to cover next. So what I'm going to cover next is S3. And then we can also maybe talk about a CDN, but it's like those are going to look really similar. Let's go ahead and go through some comments right now. I'll zoom out a little. I didn't talk about the way that the query looked for this. I mean, it's going to be really obvious for you guys, but I'll go ahead and write that as well. I think I'll do that before I do. Yeah, okay, we can go ahead and do that one first. Again, comments, yeah. Can we use that library in interviews? Is it tied to your account? It's not tied to an account. There are no Excalibur accounts, I think. And so I did actually put it up there because I think it's totally cool if you guys use it. I don't mind at all if you guys use it. I'm not like signed in anywhere though. There's no account that I'm like signed into right now. It just like automatically pulls it up because it's like tied to my it's in the cookie or whatever. And I always use the same machine every week for my streams. And so it always has it pulled up and ready to go. I don't know if you guys can use it in an interview. Let me go ahead and do this. I have no idea. You should ask your interviewer. Yeah, and then I don't know if there's that. I'm okay if I'm 100% okay with you guys using my library though. Yeah. That's why I put it up there, is that I'm of course okay with you guys using it. Why PostgreSQL? Because it's easier. It's if you don't need to scale, then don't scale. But so PostgreSQL is don't scale prematurely. That's the only reason why I have PostgreSQL there. Of course, with DynamoDB, I feel like, of course, maybe there's a way to have it as a single machine setup or something, but it does like auto provisioning, and it's like I don't know if like by default you're going to be able to have a DynamoDB setup that's cheaper than whatever PostgreSQL just deployed to a single machine is going to be. It's like, I don't know, you can get a EC2 micro instance for like $5 a month or something. But yeah, so like DynamoDB is another option. It's just that like you don't need to set it up for ultra scale right from the start. That's something that I got a lot of feedback on in my earliest videos on this channel, is that a lot of people were like, hey, you don't need to scale it. My interviewer was not cool with how I like overscaled my solution following your videos. And it was like, I wanted to demonstrate how to do like distributed transactions and stuff, because I was like, I wanted challenges, and so like ultra scaling everything is like, you know, that's exciting. That's what actually involves applying your brain. But like if you don't have to scale, then don't. And so PostgreSQL, you know, if you have less than 10,000 hits per second, you can get away with one machine. PostgreSQL can definitely handle 10,000 hits per second. That's 10,000 hits per second. That's commonly quoted rule of thumb that I've heard a lot. I'm going to do one more question, then we can go ahead and get into some of these other approaches. Yeah. Maybe you can take this at the end. I know this is a read heavy problem, thus we can put cache to deal with hot partition issue, but how do you deal with it if it's a write heavy use case? Okay, so if it's write heavy, so like if you did have some kind of if it was write heavy, okay, and then if so is it hot partition in terms of the reads or in terms of the writes? So you can either have a hot partition issue in terms of writes, which is I think I usually think of like Twitter in terms of hot partitions in terms of writes. or that'd be like people that are heavy tweeters, people that tweet a lot. In order for them to be tweeting enough that it'd be a hot partition write, it would of course have to be an extravagantly high number of writes. Yeah, but that's one of the things is hot partitions on reads versus writes. Most people just say hot partition issue, and they don't know about the distinction between in terms of the reads or in terms of the writes. Yeah, I can go ahead and talk about how to overscale this, just because that's exciting and stuff. But first, let's go ahead and do some of my next steps before I get into some of these other things. How the query works for listing details. So over here, you would have select from that, and I think you would just go ahead and do what is it? Listing ID equals that. You don't even really need the order by. Yeah. Okay. S3 as the server. Okay, I think this would be fun. Let's go ahead and put that over here. We're going to do approach 3, which is S3. So instead, you would just go ahead and have your S3 bucket as, you'd still generate them just like you did over there. And then you've got, so S3 is an object store. It's like a database. And so it's technically kind of like letting them access your database directly. S3 is really weird. It's somewhere between a CDN and an object store. Nope. Oh, come on. And that, of course, has some static files on it, like that. And then we're also going to draw the CDN one, and it's going to look really similar. I still would like to draw it out, though. So this would be if you're using, what is it, like Akamai or Cloudflare. And we're going to use this. That is our CDN. It's push-based. We'd be using a push-based CDN. And extra large. Okay, you're just deploying static files to a push-based CDN. I guess I can even prefix it with that, like, oh geez, oh geez. Okay. There we go. That looks right. Okay. Now we can move back to some of the questions you guys had. Yeah. Okay, here load balancer storage might be bottleneck. We definitely need purging strategy in order to keep the load balancer resourceful. So as in like storage space on the load balancer. So you can actually have like the load balancer could be you can literally have like it's like an EC2 instance. So it's like a physical machine. It's not necessarily so there are hardware load balancers that you can get, but you could actually have it as just like a physical machine, and then you're just bound by I think the disk space that it has. So that would be like I think you even have like 100 terabytes now. And then like how big is this web page going to be? Is it like 10 kilobytes? Is it like 4 kilobytes? Actually, you know what? I just pull up the network and then we're just going to load it. Then we can check the size. I just like to, you're probably right that, you know, storage is going to become an issue at some point, particularly if you're trying to keep these files in RAM. I mean, that's going to be a huge issue. Oh yeah, we had it right there. It was how do I get rid of this thing? Seven kilobytes. So let's say that they're 10 kilobytes. So 10 KB. And then if we had 1 terabyte of storage, you're right that I mean I think it would be an issue at some point. I'm just curious how many posts we can store at that. So 100 posts would be so 100 kilobytes, 1 megabyte is 100 listings equals 1 megabyte, and then we multiply that by 100 that by 1,000. So if we had 100,000 listings, that would be 1 gigabyte, and then we would be able to have 100 million listings is 1 terabyte. So that's a pretty big number of listings. That's kind of a lot. If this was what we had for a full year of listings, how many would it be per day? So let's say 365 days for the above. And so then that would be 3 per day would be for 1,000. So then that would be 300,000. Is it 300,000 per day? This would be 3 times this. Yeah, I think you get 300,000 listings per day then. If that's how much you get for that. And then if it's 100,000 seconds in a day, so that'll be 3 listings per second is supported by that much space. So, I mean, that's going to look kind of low. That's going to look kind of low, but you like go back over here and I mean, this is just one category. And it's just Seattle. So I mean, if it was everywhere, maybe they're like, maybe they have like a specific cache, like maybe they have like US West 2 is handling all of Seattle. So if it's 3 TPS and we were thinking about like this one's for all of Seattle, what if I did, could I do worldwide? Is there a way to just do worldwide on Craigslist? Okay, so now I'm starting to kind of see it. It's like that was just one category for just, there it is. Okay. No, I can't just do worldwide, really? I'm kind of disappointed by this. I was really hoping to be able to see that. What about this? No, okay, that's not what I was expecting either. Okay, I'm kind of seeing your point though. I'm kind of seeing your point. Maybe for worldwide, it would be more than 3 listings per second. So maybe you would probably need to, you're kind of making the point that we would probably need to do partitioning or something, or at least for this. So you might be storage bound on this. With S3, so S3 is not really going to be as storage bound. So that one does have like 10 petabytes, or it has something like easily, I think it's like 1 petabyte minimum per bucket. And so one bucket's going to have more than you would ever need for all of your files, I think, on Craigslist. And then it does handle the replication for you. But I think that is going to become quite the IO bottleneck. I feel like that would be quite an IO bottleneck for S3. It's probably not going to support, I think it only supports like no more than I think they charge extra for that. You'd probably want to switch over to CDN. Okay. I'm going to do one more question, then we can go ahead and look at some other approaches. Can you emphasize a little bit more on the static files aspect of your approaches? So it's the really cool part is that you can literally just do this. There's no hit against this or the database. You're able to hit just this and serve it entirely off of this without having to do a query against your database. It's static files. It's that's what's really cool, is that you don't have to do a database query. You don't have to hit an EC2 instance running some kind of Java service or whatever it is that you're using for your backend service. You don't actually have to have a backend service and a database involved in servicing these requests. You're able to serve them straight off of an S3 bucket, CDN, without ever having to involve a server or a database in the request response pattern. Like, it's just closed off right here. It's you send in a request to CDN, get a response back, the page is loaded, you're done. You don't have to hit anything over here because you got your full HTML file right there. That's what's really phenomenal about this. Okay. Yeah, I know you wanted to see the partitioning thing. So I did both of these. I talked about this stuff. We can go ahead and talk about read replicas and partitioning keys. So let's talk about cranking up the read volume first. So if you're going to do higher read volume, I kind of want to use this one with, come on. Is it not doing that? All right, maybe it's the shift key. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to do approach 5, higher read volume. So another alternative is that so that would be this. If you might hit a bottleneck over here instead of just having the bottleneck with this thing right here. So we might have this thing might be totally solved with even the, I kind of want to keep the load balancer trick, actually, that I kind of want to work off of because that's how it originally worked. So with the load balancer trick. But if we want to scale up this thing right here, we would maybe want to do read replicas. And so next we're going to show you how to do some read replicas. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this, and going to move this chunk off like that. This is the master database. You would probably want to have a synchronous read replica for at some point, just for redundancy. I feel like you would still want to have a synchronous read replica. I usually don't actually draw it, but I feel like that is kind of important to have. Actually, I guess large was pretty good for this. But you would also want to have other read replicas. We'll have those. There we go. Okay, and we're going to draw our read replicas just like this. Use this. I'm going to do dashed lines. And you're going to do your reads can go off of this. You don't quite need to partition yet. That would be if you have higher write volumes when you, or storage bound, if your DB itself becomes storage bound. Okay. And then you would have this, which is going to be, that kind of works off of the write ahead log as well. So both the DB triggers and the read replicas go off of the write ahead log. And so you still have, that is what you're serving for the listings. And we're going to take this and we're going to do that. There. All right, so we scaled up the read volume. You can go ahead and post a link to this right now, but we're also going to handle the higher write volume as somebody had requested, which is probably where we're going to switch over to DynamoDB. So here's just kind of like a checkpoint link, like that. I think a couple more comments got posted, so I guess I can do those before I talk about handling the write volume. But for if this thing is starting to have any kind of bottlenecks, I think read replicas is probably the first thing that you're going to need to do. You can, that would be what, like read units, RCUs in DynamoDB. So if you're just using DynamoDB from the get-go, you would just go ahead and crank up the RCUs, and I feel like internally this is probably what it's going to do. Let me go ahead and answer a couple of questions, and we can go ahead and crank up the write volume. SEO makes this problem really interesting. I completely agree. This is the static files are very genius for improving. And that, I mean, that's also good for the end users. The end users also are really going to like it if your pages are loading fast. There's a rule of thumb that if your pages take longer than 2 seconds to load, then they're gonna stop using it. They're just not going to use it at all. On some products where it's like, for example, when you're using Google Ads for trying to make an ad, or if it's for Amazon's third-party seller web pages where you're trying to list products on Amazon.com, they're able to get away with longer page load times. But it's because you're not paying for, you're not using that service directly. You're actually using it as a means of creating something, and so you're just kind of like locked into using these crappy web pages. And so on some stuff where it's a paid service for trying to make your business work, you're able to get away with crap like that. But otherwise, you really want some really fast page load times. You need to have cron jobs to push new updated pages to Google Analytics in order to start looking new. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, why do we have synchronous read replica? Redundancy. So if for example your master DB were to if it were to get the power cycled, or if it were to just have the disk corrupted or something, you should just have a synchronous read replica, probably even in a different availability zone entirely, just for the sake of redundancy, durability, just really making sure it's properly persistent. I think I've actually seen in my current company, we really don't have good practices because we have an internal facing tool. And so we were using PostgreSQL, and actually something that happened is that we lost all of our production data for the past month because they weren't doing this. It was like, oh, hey, our database is down. Huh. I guess we should try to get it back up, guys, huh? Right? Like, should we get our database back up? And then we did, and the fucking table was gone. It was, yeah, lost like a whole month of production data because we didn't have a synchronous replica of it. It's a little bit beyond just having backups. It's like we had a backup maybe like once a month or something, but like if you don't want to lose, if it's external facing and you don't want to lose a single record, you should really be doing some kind of redundancy to those records. And so it's I mean, if you're okay with losing even a single record, if you're okay with losing a handful of records every so often, then you can do an async replica, and then you just have read replicas in general. But if you don't want to lose a single record ever, synchronous read replica is the way to go. It's really you've reduced your chance of losing a single record by multiplying. You've taken the downtime availability number and you just multiplied it by itself. So if this thing has an availability of like 99.99 for just one, that still is a one in, what is that? 100,000, 1 in 10,000. That seems really small, but if it's external facing and you have it up for an entire year or like 5 years straight, always online, it's kind of bad. With a synchronous read replica, you've taken that 0.01 and you've turned it into like 0.00, shit, I don't even know how, it's 0.01 squared. It's 0.01 squared is how small it is after adding the synchronous read replica. Yep, there you go. By SEO, you mean search engine optimization. I'm pretty sure, yeah, that's definitely what he's talking about. Okay, let's talk about the right stuff. Let's talk about the write volume, and then I can go ahead and look at the chat again. The write volume, right? Is that, I want to check. I haven't missed anything else I want to talk about. Yeah, let's go ahead and crank up that write volume. So in this case, you are going to go ahead and be partitioning. And so the way that looks is that you've actually got a couple of different master nodes that you've sharded over. And each one's going to have some read replicas. So you're actually going to kind of have a thing of read replicas for both of them. Actually, let's go ahead and do this, and then I don't know how I want to orient this properly. Each one's going to have its own read replicas independently. You could do something in a little bit different, a shuffle sharding approach, but it's gonna look a little bit like this. This is kind of like the best way to think about it, I think. And then you've got this partitioning key over here. You should probably be using a DynamoDB, probably the best way to go. You're probably not going to need strong consistency, although DynamoDB does offer strong read consistency in case you did need that for whatever reason. So that's the partitioning key, and then that would make this one the sort key. And so then you would have your proper primary key by combining the two of these two. Timestamp is still going to be a really good idea for the secondary index. So you got your read replicas, and then you've got this, which is going to be a DB trigger, and it goes off of both of those. It just, yeah. Let's make that curved. There we go. Cool. Awesome. All right. And so now we've got high write volume 2. We've got enough read volume for the listings view service. And we've got, so the load balancer is one approach. I feel like at this point you would probably also want, I mean, if you're, yeah, okay. Maybe on these two approaches, you probably want the CDN instead. I guess it would either be the CDN or the S3 object store. It'd be one of these two. I'll just leave it with the load balancer since that's what they originally did, and that was like the classic approach. I think Craigslist used to be a lot more US focused, and then it probably didn't have nearly high enough TPS to warrant anything like that. But now I'm kind of seeing it. I guess another thing that you could even do is, so Craigslist had Seattle dot. And so, I mean, I guess you could even just have each machine is running its own little thing like this. So Seattle dot Craigslist.com might be its own load balancer static files thing. And then your task runner could just deploy it over to that one. And then that would also have your database. You can have your little setup of the database shard for a specific thing. So it'd be federation. So when you first had Facebook come out, I heard that it actually had something like you had, let me type this out. You had like harvard.facebook.com and you had yale.facebook.com. And each one was like an entirely independent thing, and you couldn't interact across the Harvard and Yale accounts. They were like entirely different websites. So it would similarly be like the database is sharded for these two things, but you don't really necessarily think of it as like sharding. It's like almost an entirely separate website, almost like how you can kind of do like WordPress websites. There's multiple different WordPress websites. They all run WordPress. So it looked kind of like that. And I mean, you can do the same thing with Craigslist. And from the way that it's set up like this, that's kind of what I get the impression that they might be doing. Yeah. Okay, I think I've covered everything that I want to. I'm going to go through the live chat comments again. I think I'm pretty happy with where we're at, though. So I'm going to go ahead and share a link again. So this is what I've got right now. And I'm going to go through some comments, but I don't know if I'm really going to be drawing that much more. There was one comment I think I didn't actually get through. I don't know if I actually got through one of these. Oh, yeah. So I talked about that. I didn't talk about hot partitions, though. This one doesn't necessarily handle hot partitions. I mean, so with partition key, you could maybe co-locate the categories that are lower in volume. And then if there's one that's more hot, you would just go ahead and stick it out into, you could give one category its like own machine if it's a little bit more hot than the others. Otherwise, I don't think there's actually a great solution to handling it if one partition gets so hot that you might need to have multiple. You could do the trick with adding the random ID. So if it's hot enough that it can't handle the write volume, then what you would do is that you would have this random ID that you would append to it. And so then that would spread the write volume across multiple machines. But then in the read, you'd have scatter gather across those machines for the specific category. And then that could be a problem. Your read volume would still likely be heavier than your write volume. But if you were write heavy, in that the write volume is at least 10x bigger than your read volume, and you did that random integer trick, that would actually maybe be a really good solution for that. If your hot partition was that bad, and that would be a solid workaround, because the scatter gather would not be happening at a high enough traffic volume that you'd actually be able to take down the database. Hopefully, yeah, that is an interesting issue though. I'm going to read through these comments though that I said I'd get through like a minute ago. I usually think of saying we can use something like Lucene for dealing with the search thing. Well, so like that's for text search. That's if you're doing string search. But for these pages, it's let's go back to this. Oh, it does have this. Is it powered by Google, or hey, it does have string search. I don't think that was always there. I think the original Craigslist didn't have that, and you would just have these listings and it wouldn't have the string search. But if you did support yes, it's Lucene or Lucene. Elasticsearch is, I think, I'm pretty sure Elasticsearch is built on top of Lucene. But yeah, those would be the way to go if you needed string search. Could you explain how the listings DB read replicas to solve the problem of high read volume? Yeah, well, so with the higher read volume, you just have, each of these are just clones of the listings DB. So when you have a write to this one, it's going to go ahead and write it to each of those. So let's say that we have, I don't know, 100 TPS down. So this one's getting 100 writes per second to it, which is totally handleable. You can totally handle that on PostgreSQL. But each of these are clones. And let's say that we were trying to do 300,000 TPS of reads. So PostgreSQL would not be able to handle that. So instead, what you would do is that you would have these three machines, and you have a load balancer in front of them. Actually, is probably what you would have, is that you do a load balancer in front of it, and it just maybe do round robin or something like that. Round robin, or I don't know, but it would pick whatever. There's a couple of different load balancer algorithms for this, but it would distribute the traffic volume evenly amongst them. So then this one would get 100,000 TPS, this one would get 100,000 TPS, and this one would get 100,000 TPS. You'd be like right at the limit though, so you'd maybe want to have a few more than this. But like if you had, let's say, 200,000 TPS, divide that by 3, you get 66,000 each, and so then that is still under the limit. Just right under the limit. But it's, yeah, that would do it. Yeah, and then each of these have the full volume. It's a full clone of the listings DB, and so any query that you send is interchangeably handleable by all three of these. That's why the load balancer works just fine. And then if you partition it, then it would have to you'd have a load balancer per partition or something like that, or the load balancer would have to know which partition has what. And so you'd also have, instead of just being a dumb load balancer, it'd be more of a request router. And so your load balancer becomes a request router over here in this case, if you're able to combine those. I know DynamoDB has a request router component internally, and so then that one finds like where the proper partition would live. Yeah. Okay. Can't one of the read replicas be promoted to master instead of a synchronous replica? So if you're doing asynchronous replication, you can do that. That is one way to go, is that you would just have leader election. But if you are doing something like this, where it's Postgres, so if you want synchronous replication, you would want to have a first in line, maybe for the failover. So if your master goes down, your synchronous read replica would become the new master. But with DynamoDB, that's definitely what you would probably be doing, where you have asynchronous replication instead of synchronous. You're okay with maybe getting it dropped right or something, or maybe you would just wait for at least one of your replicas to give you a thumbs up back. But I think it's non-trivial to set that up with Postgres. I think with Postgres, it'd be a lot easier to set up a synchronous read replica instead of trying to have like an at least one thumbs up from your read replicas before you send a response back. I'm just thinking for a second. And so another reason why this is okay is also the latency expectation. So when you're doing a posting, it's okay for you to have a little bit higher latency than if for the reads. So the reads, you want those to be really fast, like Jitendra was saying, that you want to have really fast page load times to the reads. Having a specified synchronous read replica is definitely going to decrease. It's going to increase your latency. It's going to increase your latency, and so you're going to get a little bit slower of a response back. But this is along the posting route, and so it's okay for it to be a little bit slower when you're doing a post as opposed to the reads, because you're providing a service for they're trying to like run a business essentially. They're trying to make money, or they're more you just don't really care as much about latency when it's the post side of things. Good call though. This that works for DynamoDB, but not for synchronous replicas. So yeah, there we go. I think if we are using multiple DBs for writes, we should go with a leader list or multi-leader DB. So with leader lists, the issues that I think leader list does kind of have some issues. Like it's more of I mean, I guess leader list does kind of have you can have a partition key with leader lists. I guess that does kind of work. But then you have those like quorum reads. With leader lists, it seems like it usually is a little bit more tending towards scatter gather happening. Maybe that's just for when you're doing stronger consistency. I don't think it should make a huge difference if it's leaderless or multi-leader. Yeah, you are correct that DynamoDB is single leader. You're completely correct on that. You're correct that that one is single leader, but by doing partitioning, it would still be able to scale up just fine. Partitioning is the trick to handling higher volumes of higher write volume. So DynamoDB is going to be fine. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't pick a leaderless database here. I haven't really done anything with leaderless database in a little while. Maybe that would work fine here. I can't think of right now why it would maybe have any issues. I think I'll write that though. in one of my previous companies, searching and filtering are powered through Elasticsearch and actual page hosted through CDN. Elasticsearch is only missing piece here. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. That is definitely something that I've seen. You really need Elasticsearch if you're going to be doing text search. So I see that Craigslist does currently support text search, but I don't remember it having that. And yeah, I mean, I guess I can kind of draw that out really quick with talk about with like approach 3. You could even have a read optimized view. So I can go ahead and even draw that out, is that if you wanted to have a read optimized view for use a DB trigger there as well for making your read optimized view. And then when you're doing your query, it would go through that. And then you'd have your right optimized view over here. Maybe it's something like Cassandra. I think DynamoDB is maybe also fine. If you're going to use an inverted index, though, you probably want to go ahead and use Elasticsearch. You can't use this as a primary store, though. Elasticsearch is not intended to be used as a system of record. I don't think it can, I don't know if it can really do DB triggers that well either. I recall it at least used to have some issues with DB triggers. And I think it still says in the documentation not to use it as a system of record. So this would be your system of record. It can be Cassandra, it can be DynamoDB. So this would be the text search approach. That's one way to do that. Yeah, I didn't actually draw that out. I should maybe do that. So what I can do is, here, I'll just do and this would also be part of your partition key as well. Okay, I think this is actually approach 7. And then this one would be approach 6. I guess it was good explanation for, yeah, okay. I'm going to post the link again, and I think we're just going to go ahead and wrap it up. If you guys have any further questions, feel free to post them in the Discord group. I'm of course going to create a thread for this. Yeah, so here's the link. I'm also going to put it in the video description like right now before I even close the stream. Final Excel draw diagram. Save. There. All right, it's already in the video description now. And I've lost the live chat. It's muted. Need to do that. There we go. Okay. There we go. That's the final Excalibur diagram. I think I've handled all your questions. I think this was actually a lot more than I was planning on originally covering. This was really great. I am surprised by how much we actually discussed on this problem. We really handled a lot of different approaches, way more than I was expecting. This was really fun. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. I'll let you guys go. And again, if you have any other questions, feel free to put them in Discord. I'll get the files up hopefully tomorrow, if not within the next week. And again, the Excalibur diagram is already in the video description. Thanks again. I'll let you guys go, and I hope to see you again next week.